Revenge with Karen.
I'm sorry, who the hell signed off on this quarter's grant disbursement? I asked, holding up the printed ledger like it was a dead rat I'd found in the breakroom fridge. The finance intern blinked at me with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who just realized they'd submitted an Excel sheet with pivot tables they didn't understand. No one in the room spoke. It was quiet, too quiet, for Monday morning meeting about federal money. That's when I knew I wasn't just the only one who understood the system. I was the system. 14 years at this institute, and I could tell you the funding code for every research project from Alzheimer's protein mapping to that half-baked snail mucus skin serum study the marketing department kept trying to rebrand as cutting-edge biotech. I'd never missed an audit, never lost a file, never fudged a signature. My desk was a fortress of color-coded folders, post-it flags, and those little legal tabs that made auditors weep with joy. And still, I sat through meetings where the new VP of Strategic Growth called me administrative overhead. My title was Director of Sponsored Programs, but around here, they called me Brenda from compliance. Like I was just another coffee-stained cubicle ghost haunting the back halls of a crumbling bureaucracy. Matter that I managed over $28 million in active federal grants. Didn't matter that I'd written half the grant renewal language myself, because legal said it was too dry and bailed halfway through the application. Nope, I was legacy. Quiet, useful, but not shiny, not transformational. And then they brought in the new regime. You know the type. Freshly imported from a failed startup with a logo that looked like a gluten-free snack brand. Talked about innovation ecosystems and future-proofing compliance verticals. I swear one guy tried to give me a fist bump during a meeting about budget overruns. Another VP tried to streamline our grant process by suggesting we eliminate quarterly reconciliations. What's the worst that could happen? He said with a smirk. I didn't answer him, but I remember thinking, you'll find out. One day, someone opens the wrong folder at the wrong time and wonders why your signature's on a grant you weren't authorized to touch. But here's the thing, I didn't fight it, not yet. You learn a lot being underestimated. You learn that people get sloppy when they assume you won't bite back. They cut corners. They reroute protocols. They say things they shouldn't in emails because they assume Brenda from compliance doesn't know how to use search filters. Spoiler, I do. Oh, while I have you, quick sidebar. If you're listening to this and enjoying the ride, do me a solid, smash that like button and hit subscribe. I know, everyone says that. But really, 95% of y'all are ghost listening without subscribing, and it means a lot to the folks who help put this chaos together. Keeps the wine cold and the stories hot. Now where were we? Right, slouching toward disaster. Real unraveling started when I was asked to train my replacement, a perky mid-level hire named Skylar who wore loafers with no socks, and once told me he was manifesting a leadership opportunity in compliance. I almost printed out the federal codebook and dropped it on his foot. But instead, I smiled, showed him the difference between direct and indirect costs. Watched him glaze over like a day-old Krispy Kreme. My instincts told me I was being pushed out, but they wrapped it in a lovely HR-flavored euphemism, organizational restructuring to realign institutional priorities, which is corporate speak for we think you're in the way. I played the part, took the meetings, smiled at the right times. And when HR slid the severance agreement across the table and said, "We're eliminating your position," I didn't flinch. I just asked one thing. Can I have a printed copy of my last approved grant packets for my personal files? They blinked. Sure, great, I said, all of them, including June's submission. I watched them squirm at that one. June had been a doozy. Multiple PIs, cross-departmental signatures, a delicate dance of compliance ballet. But they nodded. Then I signed, took my copy, and left with a smile. They thought I was gone. Had no idea my name still lived on every federal dollar they were spending. And that would become a very big problem. They showed up like a plague of khaki-colored locusts, the new leadership team, fresh off some transformational retreat in the Catskills, armed with laser pointers, branded notebooks, and mouths full of buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing, but somehow still managed to give me hives. I sat through their first all-hands like I was at a TED talk delivered by a malfunctioning robot. Disruption is opportunity. Legacy processes are friction points. We're sunsetting outdated compliance modalities. I wanted to stand up and scream, Just say you don't know what the hell we do and want to fire people. But I didn't. I just nodded, highlighted my meeting notes in 3 colors, added sunset modalities to my personal dictionary of corporate word salad. The whispers started the next week. Departmental realignments, an org chart review, people avoiding eye contact with me in the hallway like I'd come down with HR leprosy. I've been through 3 executive shakeups in my time, and they all smell the same, like peppermint gum and plausible deniability. Then came the meeting invite, 8:30 a.m. HR. No agenda. If you've worked in an office longer than 5 minutes, you know what that means. You're not getting a promotion. You're not getting a raise. You're getting the talk. Sure enough, I walked in and found Karen from HR. Yes, her real name was Karen, already sitting at the tiny table with a manila folder and a coffee that said "Kick Us Boss Lady" in sparkly letters. That alone made me want to flip the desk. Next to her sat the new deputy director of operations, Derek. Looked like he'd been printed out of a frat boy template and accidentally wandered into public service. "Brenda," Karen said, voice syrupy, "thank you for coming in. We wanted to." I held up a hand. "Let me guess, restructuring, strategic vision, budgetary alignment." Karen blinked. "Well, yes, we're eliminating your position as part of our organizational optimization strategy." Derek chimed in, trying to sound empathetic, but coming off like someone reading from a hostage script. "This has nothing to do with your performance." "It never does," I said, "except it always does." Karen pushed the folder forward. Inside, severance package, exit schedule, health coverage extensions, and a glossy brochure titled "Your Next Chapter, Career Transitions with Grace." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I looked them both in the eye and said, "I accept." Derek looked surprised. Karen gave me that HR smile, the one that's supposed to be comforting, but feels like a paper cut on your soul. "I do have one request," I said, flipping through the paperwork like I was checking my lunch receipt. "I'd like a printed copy of the most recent grant submissions, for my own records, all PI files and supplemental documentation. Especially June." Karen frowned a little. "You mean the ones you submitted?" "Yes," I said. "Since I'm the listed PI on several of them, it would be nice to have a personal copy. You know, for my scrapbook." Derek laughed nervously. "Sure, we'll get that for you." I nodded. "Thanks. Also, make sure the PI reassignment filings are submitted to the federal portal. That deadline's the 30th. Karen scribbled something on a post-it, probably intending to ignore it. They thought I was just dotting I's and crossing T's, closing up shop, taking the severance, and disappearing into the sad world of mid-career consultants who teach LinkedIn classes on reinvention. They had no clue that I was walking out with a time bomb. My badge was deactivated before I even reached the elevator. Typical. My nameplate had been peeled off by lunch. Skylar, the loafers guy, was already sitting at my desk like a puppy that peed on the rug and got promoted for it. I walked out into the autumn air feeling not free, not angry, focused, like a storm cloud that decided to schedule its lightning. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning, didn't rant online or write a Medium post about toxic workplace culture. I just went home, poured myself a mug of peppermint tea, and booted up my personal laptop. The flash drive was small, silver, labeled Q2 Submissions Final. It slid into the port like a scalpel into soft flesh. There they were. The last 5 grants I submitted. My name as PI, the date stamps, the signatures, the matching filing codes from the Federal Grant Registry. And then I saw it, they were still live, still active under my name. But if they'd already started spending that money, if someone else had signed off on the next wave of disbursements, that wasn't just a paperwork error. That was fraud. And suddenly, I wasn't just laid off. I was a witness. They gave me a corner of the break room for my exit processing, folding table with a chipped mug, 2 faded HR folders, and a cardboard box that still had Valentine's decorations scribbled on the side in pink Sharpie. It was poetic, really, 14 years of spotless audits, millions in federal compliance work, and now I was being shuffled out like expired holiday candy. Skylar, my replacement, had already started moving into my office, passed by and saw him trying to untangle the cords to my dual monitors like they were Christmas lights. He had a printout of Federal Grants 101 on his desk, next to a smoothie bottle labeled Brain Fuel. I didn't knock, didn't say goodbye, let him struggle. I'd already sent my final email that morning, BCC'd to every relevant director, admin, and finance coordinator. Subject: Urgent PI Reassignment Reminder Team. Please ensure that Principal Investigator reassignment filings are submitted to the federal grant portal by EOD on the 30th. Failure to submit may result in administrative flags or temporary funding suspensions. Regards, Brenda S. Director, Sponsored Programs, through EOD Today, that's it. Cold, clinical, correct. The kind of email no one likes but everyone should fear. And yet, not a single reply. No thanks for the heads up. No, we've got it covered. Not even a typo riddled will do. From one of the junior admins who thought compliance was just that paperwork Brenda handles. Typical. I printed out one last copy of June's grant packet, 54 pages, 3 departments, 2 collaborative institutions, 6 signature fields, the whole damn enchilada. Tucked it into a slim manila folder, sealed it with a binder clip, and wrote one small note in blue pen on a sticky. Attached to the top, you'll want to triple check June. Page 17 especially. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a hint. It was a breadcrumb. I left it on Karen's desk. She wasn't there. Probably off doing damage control on a hiring freeze they hadn't yet announced. She wouldn't see it for hours. I slid my security badge into the drop box like a poker chip I didn't need anymore and walked the long hallway past the framed photos of past directors, half of whom wouldn't recognize a PI assignment if it bit them in the pension. I didn't cry, didn't feel sad. Honestly, I felt like I'd just been handed a blank check and a lighter. Out in the parking lot, I opened the back seat, slid my box in, then slipped my hand into my purse and touched the flash drive. Cool, small, just a piece of plastic and metal. But it held everything. Copies of every grant packet I'd submitted this fiscal year, download logs, data, timestamps. Evidence, not gossip, not rumor, evidence. I didn't even have to dig for it. I already had it, just from doing my job right. My drive home was quiet. Leaves had started turning, burnt orange, fire red, that golden yellow you only get for 2 weeks a year before Ohio becomes gray and wet and miserable. I stopped by the liquor store on Main, bought a bottle of that smoky bourbon I only saved for audit week and funerals, went home, kicked off my shoes, and pulled up the federal grant registry. Logged in with my credentials, still active, of course. No one had updated a damn thing, clicked through to the June submission, and there it was, my name. Brenda S. Principal Investigator, stamped, federally registered, live, and under it, a PDF uploaded 3 days ago. Budget adjustment form, signed not by me but by Skylar. He'd signed off as the new PI. My eyes scanned the file. No federal reassignment notice. No approval chain. No supplemental documentation. That's not just sloppy, that's illegal. I didn't scream, didn't even flinch. I just opened a new document, titled it Page 17 Budget Anomaly, and began to type. Let them call it restructuring. Let them call me outdated. I wasn't angry. I was documenting. The bourbon sat untouched on the counter. I poured it, sure, but didn't drink it. Just stared at the amber glow in the glass while the cursor blinked on my laptop screen, taunting me like it knew something I didn't. It was well past midnight, the kind of hour where the house feels too quiet and the refrigerator hum sounds like a whisper. I'd spent my whole career preventing this exact kind of mess, and now I was sitting in the middle of it, watching it unfold in real time. The public grant database was a labyrinth of bureaucratic jargon. It was my natural habitat. I'd spent years in those digital trenches, cross-checking identifiers, matching approval codes to federal disbursement numbers, making sure every penny was accounted for. I knew every quirk of that system, every glitch, every slow-loading field, every obscure line item buried in a 40-page compliance notice. So when I typed in my institute's name and pulled up the list of active awards, my pulse didn't spike. Not yet. Search results popped up, one after another. Award hash 1087 CRISPR expansion. Award hash 2031 viral genome atlas. Award hash 2560 5 marine toxin synthesis. And beside every single one of them, under Principal Investigator, was my name. Brenda S., still active, still authorized. The problem? I wasn't employed there anymore. The bigger problem, most recent award disbursement had gone through 2 days after my termination. Federal funds, approved, released, and spent, under credentials that should have been deactivated the minute Karen handed me my box of Valentine's decorations. I leaned back in my chair and let out a low laugh that wasn't really a laugh. More like disbelief dipped in gasoline. It wasn't shock. It was validation. Because I knew it. These idiots wanted to modernize compliance without understanding what compliance even meant. They thought the rules were just guidelines, that paperwork was a nuisance, that grants were like gift cards from the government. But here's the thing about federal funding. It doesn't care about your ego. It cares about signatures, timestamps, and designations. And when those don't line up, that's not a clerical oversight. That's fraud. I clicked deeper into the disbursement logs. Last upload was labeled Budget Adjustment Q3. Same naming convention I'd used for years, except the digital signature didn't match mine. The timestamp showed it was uploaded from the internal finance IP. The signer, Skylar. Skylar, who probably thought federal compliance was a brand of copper paper. He'd signed off as acting PI. There's no such thing. My cursor hovered over the audit trail link. The system pulled metadata, uploader credentials, modification history, attached documentation. No reassignment request. No signature authorization from the federal system. They hadn't just skipped a form, they'd spent money they weren't legally entitled to spend. I felt something inside me shift, not anger, something colder, harder. You spend long enough working in compliance, and you start to think like an investigator. I pulled a notebook from my drawer, the same one I'd used during audits. 2 columns, authorized actions on the left, violations on the right. Then I started listing. Under violations, I wrote, unauthorized signature on funding release, failure to submit PI reassignment documentation, false certification of compliance continuation, misuse of federal disbursement credentials. Each bullet felt like a nail in a coffin. Then I went back to the public record and checked the Institute's main federal account ID. Sure enough, funds had already been transferred to their general research pool, which meant that somewhere, right now, Skylar and his innovation task force were probably celebrating another successful quarter with government money tied to a name that didn't belong to them anymore, mine. I closed the laptop slowly. This wasn't just incompetence. It was arrogance. And arrogance, when mixed with federal money, doesn't end in a slap on the wrist. It ends in investigations, suspensions, criminal charges. I sat there in the dim glow of the screen, fingers resting on the keyboard, and whispered to the empty room, you should have listened to the lady from compliance. The bourbon finally went down smooth. Cold fury, warm burn. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it, for the record. Then I began downloading everything. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. No emails to check. No panicked voicemails from a lab tech who'd missed a grant deadline. No Monday stand-up meeting led by someone who thought NIH stood for New Innovation Hub. Just birds, silence, and the hum of an old fridge that never quite sealed right. I made coffee, strong enough to burn the fog out of my skull, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open like a stage prop. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't need to be. No grand gesture, no anonymous whistleblower email. No dear sir/madam, you might want to look into this. I just logged into LinkedIn, clicked edit profile, and changed my headline to Independent Research Compliance Consultant. That was it. The message wasn't for the world, it was for them. Within the hour, I saw the views spike. First from the Midwest, then DC, then, predictably, from someone with a job title that included Innovation Strategy Lead. Notification told me what I already knew. They were watching, probably sweating, probably wondering what I knew, who I'd told, how loud I might get. They'd soon realize I hadn't told anyone. I didn't need to. I just had to wait. Because that's the thing about federal grants. Sooner or later, someone always comes to check the receipts. And wouldn't you know it, my moment came 2 days later, tucked inside a routine operations bulletin forwarded to my personal email by accident. Someone forgot to update the distribution list. Sloppy. Beautifully, poetically sloppy. Subject: upcoming HHS compliance, visit Thursday body. As part of our ongoing participation in federal research programs, a scheduled site review will be conducted by representatives from the Department of Health and Human Services. Please ensure all relevant compliance documentation is up to date and accessible. Meeting location: Conference Room 3B. I read it twice, letting the words wash over me like a warm bath. HHS, not a random internal check, not a soft review, a federal audit. Even better, scheduled 2 weeks in advance, which meant they hadn't found anything yet, which meant I still had time. I opened my phone to delete the email, then paused. Muscle memory kicked in and I opened my calendar app instead, just to see what was still synced. And there it was. Conference Room 3B, Thursday, 11 o'clock a.m. HHS site visit full staff review created by Brenda S. Access, admin. I blinked, then smiled. I'd never been removed from the scheduling system. The access wasn't high level, just enough to view room reservations, recurring meetings, a few internal distribution lists. But it was enough. Enough to track, enough to confirm, enough to make sure I saw every domino as it tipped. And I knew damn well why I still had access, because I'd never logged out. After my last day, I'd exited clean, said all the right things, dropped off my badge. But I'd left one session open on a browser window in the training laptop. Just one, tucked behind a dozen tabs of HR videos and vendor agreements. Left open, forgotten, gathering digital dust. It was a test. A breadcrumb. Never found it, never logged me out. Now that little window was my backdoor to the whole show. I stared at the alert for a long minute, sipping coffee that had gone cold, and thought, you idiots scheduled your own funeral and didn't even know it. Because here's the thing they never grasped about someone like me. I don't make scenes, I make paper trails. And right now, a federal auditor was about to follow mine. So I did the only thing I needed to do. Nothing. Didn't warn anyone, didn't make noise. I just marked the date and started organizing the files on my flash drive by severity. Because when HHS walks into your office and flips to the wrong page, it's not an oopsie, it's an investigation. And I had just the page they needed to see. Thursday, 11 sharp. The sky was the kind of gray that made the air feel heavier than it needed to be. Fitting for the day the roof started leaking on their paper empire. Inside conference room 3B, the new leadership team gathered like kids cramming for a final they didn't know was open book. Folding tables were lined with 3-ring binders in identical white spines, each one slapped with a laser-printed label. Compliance. Q1, Q3. Karen from HR was there, lips tight, blazer too bright. Skylar sat near the end of the table, looking like he hadn't slept in a week, and trying to mask it with that fake, totally prepared smile you learn from LinkedIn influencers. They didn't know it yet, but they were already underwater. The HHS auditor entered without fanfare. No badge flash, no self-important preamble. Just a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a lanyard, a government-issued laptop, and the demeanor of someone who has seen every trick in the book and written her own appendix. Good morning, she said, tone flat. Let's begin. Karen tried to crack a joke about how they'd just done some spring cleaning on the compliance folders. The auditor didn't smile. They started flipping through binders like they'd rehearsed. Budget reports, payroll alignments, purchase orders for freezers that cost more than a Honda Civic. The usual noise meant to distract, and for about 8 minutes it worked, and the auditor asked a simple question. Can you show me the June submission packet for award hash 2565? Skylar perked up. Of course. Right here. He slid the binder across the table with the pride of a magician presenting an empty hat. The auditor opened to the tab labeled Q2 Submission June. She flipped to the signature page. Silence. Not dramatic, cinematic silence. No, this was the quiet of slow realization, puzzle pieces clicking into place in real time. Her expression shifted, just slightly, eyes narrowing, brows knitting together, not anger, not confusion, recognition. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and began typing. Then she paused and asked, who is listed as the principal investigator on this award? Karen cleared her throat. That would be Skylar. Acting PI since Brenda S. was offboarded. The auditor didn't look up. Acting PI? Yes. Skylar jumped in, trying to sound authoritative. We transitioned after our org restructure. I was brought in to oversee compliance workflows during the leadership change. And the reassignment form, the federal PI reassignment form. It's required before any other party may legally sign off on fund allocations. Skylar blinked. I believe we submitted that, or it's in progress. The auditor didn't respond. She pulled up the federal portal on her phone. I scanned, waited. I imagined the room felt colder by the second. After a beat, she turned her phone around. This is the registry entry for award hash 2565. This is the most recent active PI of record. She pointed to the screen. One name, my name. Brenda S. Karen leaned in too fast. Skylar opened his mouth. The auditor cut them off. You've received funds under this award after Miss Estique's departure. June budget packet is signed by someone with no federal authorization. Skylar looked like he might pass out. It was just, a continuation. Nothing changed structurally. We were just moving things forward. The auditor nodded slowly, lips pressed together in a thin, straight line. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. She just started typing on her phone again, this time with purpose. Then she stood up. I'll be initiating a preliminary hold on the award funds until this is resolved. I'll also need to speak with your legal counsel. Karen tried to recover. Wait, hold on. I'm sure this is just a mix-up. We can explain, no need, the auditor said, collecting her things. The documents speak for themselves. And just like that, she was gone. Back in my kitchen, I watched it all happen through a quiet alert on the old scheduling platform. Meeting had been cut short, marked complete in half the scheduled time. Notes left blank. That's when I knew. The first domino had fallen. I didn't smile, not exactly. But I did open my compliance binder and flip to the next tab. Violations confirmed. The binder hit the table with a dull thud, but it echoed like a gunshot through conference room 3B. The HHS auditor didn't speak right away. She just stared at the signature block on page 17. I page and tapped her pen once, twice, then again, like a judge deciding whether to bang the gavel or swing the axe. This, she finally said, voice flat and controlled, is not a valid PI. The words hung in the air like poison. Schuyler cleared his throat. I signed as acting PI on behalf of the Institute during the transition. The auditor didn't look at him. She tapped the page again. Has this person, she pointed directly to his signature, federally reassigned as Principal Investigator through proper channels? Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The silence was thick, not tense, not awkward, suffocating. Someone, probably the assistant compliance manager who once called me too detail-oriented, let out a small cough like it might break the tension. It didn't. It just made it worse. I'll ask again, the auditor said, a bit louder now. Has this individual been authorized, official federal reassignment form, to act as PI on this award? No one moved, no one answered. The room went dead silent, and in that stillness something fractured. The auditor closed the binder, not slowly, not dramatically, just precisely, like clockwork. Then she stood, adjusted her blazer, and began packing her briefcase with clinical efficiency. No muttering, no grandstanding, just measured motion. But just as she reached the door, she paused, turned back. Voice didn't rise. It dropped, lower, sharper. I'll be initiating a formal suspension of all award funds under this program, effective immediately. Karen's face drained of color. Schuyler blinked like he hadn't registered the words. Then the auditor added, as if she were commenting on the weather, please prepare for a secondary compliance audit. I'll need direct access to all disbursement logs, sub-award documentation, and internal correspondence immediately. She left the room without another word. Then hell broke loose. Phones started ringing, first one, then two, then all at once, like an emergency siren chorus. Someone from finance burst in holding a printout and whisper shouting something about frozen accounts and NSF flags. Karen staggered into the hallway, calling legal with shaking hands. Schuyler stood in place, staring down at the page like it might morph into a valid signature if he just blinked hard enough. Lab tech poked their head in and asked if they could still purchase supplies off the grant. The look they got back probably took a year off their life. Somewhere, someone dropped a binder. Another cursed loud enough to echo through the vent system. The conference room, once a smug fortress of strategic visioning, had devolved into triage. And I was nowhere near it. I was home, sitting cross-legged on my porch with a laptop on my knees and a notepad beside me. I was sipping lukewarm coffee from a mug that said trust the process and smiling in a way I hadn't in months. My email pinged, a compliance bulletin forwarded from a former intern who still remembered which side their bread was buttered on. Subject: urgent temporary funding hold on federal research awards body. As of 11:32 a.m., all active disbursements under awards #2565, #2031, #1087 have been formally paused pending investigation. All personnel listed under these awards must cease spending activity immediately. A follow-up directive will be issued after legal review. I leaned back, let the autumn breeze cut through the fading morning fog, and watched a squirrel dig furiously in my yard like he, too, was looking for misappropriated federal funds. Let them scramble. Let the suits pace and the phones ring and the binders multiply like rabbits. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The paperwork had done its job, and I wasn't just vindicated. I was proven. They say panic moves in waves, but at the Institute that afternoon, it hit like a tsunami. The moment the auditor left the building, every floor became a different flavor of disaster. Compliance was camped out in the kitchen, Legal took over HR's office. Someone was sobbing in the stairwell between second and third. Skylar had locked himself in the conference room with a copy of the federal reassignment form and a highlighter. Like coloring it, yellow would make it magically appear in the audit trail. Karen was on her fifth urgent Zoom call with outside counsel, whispering fast and low like the IRS was wiretapping her webcam. But none of it mattered. The audit trail doesn't care about your excuses, doesn't blink for I thought someone else did it. Doesn't forgive well, Brenda usually handled that. And speaking of me, they tried to reach me. My old office line, disconnected. Work email, auto-reply, this account has been deactivated. Personal phone, changed, new number, area code 2 states away. LinkedIn, set to private, no messages accepted. I hadn't ghosted them. I'd retired from their nonsense. So they did what desperate people always do, they scrambled. Someone from finance tried to backdate a reassignment form. Too bad the federal portal timestamps every submission to the second and keeps a log of IP addresses, user IDs, and edit attempts. Immutable, irrefutable, unforgiving. An IT manager was ordered to scrub email threads for any mention of unauthorized approvals. He found 6, including one where Skylar literally wrote, "Don't worry, I'll just sign it and we'll fix the paperwork later." That email would go on to be Exhibit A. Then came the board. The emergency meeting was called at 3:12 p.m. 7 board members, 1 angry founder, and a handful of red-eyed directors trying to act like they had answers. The founder, white-haired, old school, the kind of guy who still signed memos in cursive, wasn't one for outbursts. But that day, he slammed his fist on the table so hard it cracked the arm of his reading glasses. Who the hell was our listed pie? He barked. The room went silent. A young assistant, new, nervous, fresh from grad school, spoke up, voice barely above a whisper, "Brenda." It was Brenda, but she's gone. Gone. Not fired, not terminated. Gone. Because firing someone from compliance is one thing. Replacing them without understanding what they were is another. It was the moment the founder realized what he'd allowed. They didn't just lose an employee. They lost the legal authority tied to millions in federal research. They'd kept the grants, but not the one person who made them legal. And the government had noticed. Meanwhile, 3 ZIP codes away, I was in my living room watching the afternoon light spill across the floor. My cat, whom the Institute never let me bring to Zoom calls, curled up on the rug, purring like a saw blade. My laptop pinged. An alert from a federal site I still monitored quietly out of habit. Notification: Institute is now under federal review. Status: active. I didn't screenshot it, didn't forward it. Just stared at it for a long moment. Then I closed the laptop, went to the kitchen, pulled the cork from a half-finished bottle of Cabernet I'd been saving for the end of audit season, poured a glass, and whispered to no one in particular. I'd on time. Let them choke on their crisis calls. Let them chase a paper trail I'd already walked 100 times blindfolded. Let them burn, because the fire was lit the day they let the quiet woman from compliance walk out the door. And now the flames were licking at their budgets. They say federal audits are boring, death by spreadsheet, monotone reading of regulations, rooms full of tired suits pretending to understand procurement codes. But not this one. This one had a body count. The emergency board meeting started late. Everyone looked like they'd aged 10 years in 2 days. The founder sat at the head of the table, hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Legal was flanking him like Secret Service. Karen from HR had ditched the power blazer for something that said, "I'm cooperative. Please don't subpoena me." Skylar, rumor had it he was working remotely. Translation: hiding under a weighted blanket somewhere deep in the suburbs. The lead federal auditor stood calmly at the front of the room, a small tablet in her hand, a larger screen behind her displaying a series of compliance metrics. No fanfare, no dramatics, just cold, bureaucratic bloodletting. "We've completed our initial assessment of award #2565, she began, voice calm as still water. We identified multiple violations, including but not limited to unauthorized signatures, failure to submit PI reassignment forms, and continued disbursement of funds under unapproved leadership." No one spoke. She tapped her tablet. The screen changed. 1 page, 1 name. There it was, centered, highlighted by the cursor, Brenda S. Principal Investigator. The auditor tapped the name once. This individual was the registered PI at the time of the June disbursement. She was listed on the Federal Registry, not been formally removed, and had not submitted a reassignment authorization. She turned to the room, expression neutral but deadly. You removed her, she continued, without federal update, without notification, and without a replacement filed through proper channels. She let that hang there for a second, long enough for everyone in the room to feel their stomachs drop. That's fraud. Karen from HR looked like she might throw up. But she signed her severance. She stammered. She never said, she didn't tell us, the auditor didn't blink. She didn't have to. She flipped to the next screen, the grant portal activity log. Her credentials remained active. Your systems continued to report her name. The documents speak for themselves. Legal coughed. The founder's face turned a shade redder than the boardroom walls. Then came the line that would haunt them forever. The auditor looked around the table slowly, a deliberate eye contact with each one of them, then asked, "Who is your current principal investigator?" Silence, not the awkward kind, not even the guilty kind. This was the silence of people realizing they'd built an empire on paperwork they never understood, and that empire was crumbling under the weight of a single name. My name. Brenda S., still listed, still registered, still frozen in time like a digital ghost haunting their system. Outside the boardroom, panic would ripple, funding clawbacks, damage control, reputational freefall. Inside, just one page, one signature. Mine. I wasn't in the building, wasn't even in the city, but my revenge didn't need me there. It was already signed, stamped, and federally documented. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.